Hi guys, Nick here from Conservation Careers and welcome to the podcast. Now, to have an impact as a conservationist, you need fundraising skills in order to turn your ideas into reality. In a sector dominated by charities, the majority of conservation projects are therefore funded by donors who provide an estimated £90 billion in funding each year. These include large grants secured from governments, foundations, and corporate sponsors, to smaller donations via public campaigns, appeals, events, membership drives, and more. But where do you start if you want to secure funds for your project? Where can you find the right donors, and what steps should you go through in order to become successful and turn your ideas into reality? To discuss these questions and more is today's guest, Elena Zurli from Environmental Grants. Now, Environmental Grants is a network of professionals seeking to support conservationists by helping them to identify funding for their projects and deliver more impact. In this episode, we talk about the many ways to secure funding for a conservation project, the do's and don'ts of proposal writing, and much more besides. Elena also shares her career story, along with her advice for people like you who might be seeking to follow in her footsteps. It's a valuable episode. Sorry. Enjoy.
So my name is Elena and I'm based in Rome, Italy. And I work as a proposal enhancement officer and program management officer for the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SIAT, that are two agricultural research centers that are part of an international consortium working on agricultural research for development.
Great. Okay. And you're also here representing Environmental Grants. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I work on the spare time. I volunteer for this collaborative blog platform that is called Environmental Grants. And we are a group of fundraising, project managers, communication experts that try to spot over the internet and based on our knowledge, what funds are available for conservation and environmental projects. And we prepare technical fish and fishes that are really specific and that can give conservationists and fundraisers from all over the world the possibility to hit what is available for implementing their projects.
Fantastic. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, really, which is fundraising, environmental and conservation projects. And it's such an important topic and something that I think probably isn't discussed enough yet. Maybe,
exactly.
Without funding and the different funding streams or mechanisms that are out there, projects just wouldn't happen, and it's a real kind of skill set. And it's such an important part of the whole process of developing a project, funding a project, and then managing, implementing, and then funding the next project, which is, I guess, what most of the things that happen within the sector.
And really the reason why the funders of environmental grants started with this idea is that there are so many funds available out there, even for conservation, that may seem like a niche within the universe or no profit funding and environmental funding. But most of the time, especially newcomers to the sector, they struggle to find what is needed for the type of project that they want to implement. Right. So we really want to show people that there are funds available out there, and that they can start with their fundraising activity, and there's a basis for giving a life to their projects.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what I'd love to kind of start our discussions around then. So let's paint a picture, if it's all right, at three levels. Okay. So let's paint a picture of, I've got a small project. It's maybe, I don't know, let's say £10,000. And I'm looking to conserve. I saw a hedgehog in my garden the other day. I wanted to conserve hedgehogs in my local area. That's like project one small. Medium, let's say it's £100,000, and I'm looking to, I don't know, create a wildlife reserve locally. And let's say there's a really big project, which is say £10 million, doing, a cross-country conservation of migratory birds. How would you go about looking for funds or understanding the options for, say, a small, a medium, and a really big project? Is that something we can try and answer for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to smaller project, what I would start from is really looking what is the donor landscape, starting from your neighborhood, where you live, your city, at regional level or at national ones.
Yeah.
So most of the time, there are these type of routes for small project, either like looking for grants that are, to say, donation from institutional bodies that can be, as I said, local governments, regional one or national ones, or focusing on individual fundraising. So raising money from individuals that may be interested in what you are doing, that may be interested or have a sensitivity towards environmental cause. So for small project, I always suggest to start from what you know and what is around you, and also benchmarking, for instance, with small organizations or realities that are doing like the same thing that you want to do. Like there must be a small charity that you know, and what you could do in general is to work how they are also funding their initiative and sort of take some inspiration. So my advice would always be for small project to start from like your basis, like what is happening around you, and of course from your network.
Right, that's really good and really interesting advice. Actually, sort of look at other similar organizations.
No, benchmarking is fundamental because, I mean, first of all, there's always a good opportunity when you're doing benchmarking also for partnerships. So to look for organizations that may bring some complementary expertise to what you want to do. So you can looking for funding together with multiple partners is really what is like the biggest trend nowadays, also for small and medium organization. I mean, and the more than your work and the funding that you look for is increasing, the more partnering with other organization is fundamental. Like there's no way that any organization nowadays can get a huge grant by their own.
And why is that? Yeah, you certainly see that a lot. These sort of really big sort of multi-million, dollar, euro, pound projects. They're not individuals, are they? They're consortiums. They're a group of people coming together to do some work. Is that led by donor interest? Is that what they want? Why is that the route that's funded?
So it depends. I would always try to distinguish between like public donors and private ones, or foundation, let's say. So for public donors, I think I can bring, for instance, my own experience when I was working I worked previously for the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation. And what we wanted to do, first of all, we wanted to be like fair, as we are using taxpayers' money, to distribute fairly what the resources that are available. So just focusing continuously on one organization, one individual, NGO, research center, and so on, of course, is jeopardizing a bit this effort. And there's also an equity factor when you are implementing, for instance, projects that are involving partners in one country, for instance, in the Western world, and one country in the developing world. You want to give, even if the projects will be implemented, I don't know, in Sub-Saharan Africa or in Latin America, most of the times the recipient of the grant are organizations in the Western world. And this is something that has to change. And most of the OECD donors, for instance, are working toward. They want to see equitable, fair partnership where the benefits are shared not only with organizations that come from a certain nation, but also with the organizations that are even grassroots and that are located in the place where you're actually implementing the work.
Got you. Okay.
So there's a bit of, I think, taxpayers' accountability and equity towards partnership that are as broad as possible.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. Can you give us also paint a little bit of picture, if you could, please, as the different types of donors that are out there? We've talked about institutional, private. Could you just sort of, give if you're coming into this totally new, we don't know anything about fundraising, who are the different donor types? Who do we need to know about?
So one of the biggest donors used to be OECD countries, so public, money coming from governments, rating it as high income governments. And these are the typical and traditional public donors. We have, for instance, Germany, the US, Italy, France, all the countries that are members of the OECD. And those are, so we always have to think that they are, when they put out money for either environmental projects, conservation projects, they have to answer to the taxpayers, and they have to answer and adhere to their own political agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are fundraising for this type of, or looking for funds from these type of donors, you have to keep in mind that, yes, you're selling your project, but you also have to adhere to an agenda of a country.
Yeah.
So there are always like checks and balances that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And then, so I think up to a few years ago, this was where most of like NGO, nonprofits, research center would go for looking for their funds. And actually this is changing a lot nowadays. We have more and more like corporate or individual philanthropy. For instance, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Jeff Bezos Fund, and so on, that they're really putting out there a lot of money for causes that go from like social issues, climate change, conservation, and actually the balance, let's say, of the money that is nowadays provided, the funds that are provided by OECD countries and by corporate philanthropy, is going more towards corporate philanthropy. So they're really offering huge investments. And what is also interesting is that sometimes most of the time they offer grants and funds that are less, let's say, structured or formal with respect to the funds that are offered by public donors. So there's way more room most of the time for organization, being them small, medium, or bigger size organization, to propose their own project and also propose implementation mechanism that are, let's say, less formalized or less constraining with respect to what the public donors are offering. And so let's say that there's room for a conservationist to look for both type of funds. And of course, there's always another classical, let's say, a third way of fundraising that is like donation from individual. So what we have been used for like many years, like people from, I don't know, like Greenpeace, Oxfam, Amnesty International, being present all over the places in public spacing, asking for individual to contribute to a cause.
Right.
And
so you might be running like a campaign or an appeal or something like that, or crowdfunding even. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is a stream that I think will never disappear, but is less and less important, I think, for some type of organizations that want to sort of like sustain in a long term their projects and their portfolio. I think nowadays organizations working in the environmental field have to sort of like tap into each of these three funding type if they want to secure the activity of the organization. And also one thing that could be interesting is that in my experience, like public donors tend to be a bit risk averse versus like big foundations. So when they are looking for, when they are reviewing a project proposal, they want to make sure that there's a certain projection of benefits, that the organization is solid enough to deliver what they are proposing to deliver, and that, the outcomes are a bit like, let's say, sure. While private foundations, sometimes they're a bit more bold. They really, if you look at their call for proposals, their call for applicants, they really want some fresh, innovative like projects, and they are more willing to take a bet on something that is completely new, either in terms of research or conservation, because of course they have less accountability. They can take, let's say, they can take a wrong investment. Let's say they can bear the risk of having a wrong investment. While if we talk about public donors, as I said before, there are all matters of accountability, transparency, and so on. So they go for, let's say, something that is more sure and standardized.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of charities, and we're talking from the conservation sector at this end, as you sort of mentioned, they're looking to have income from lots of different income streams. Ideally, if you're too reliant upon one income stream, that's quite a risky strategy. It's all your eggs in one basket, I would say.
Yeah, that's very risky. In particular with public donors, I mean, they may be subject to, like, when there's a government change, priorities in environmental terms or in foreign policies, they also change. So, you can rely, for instance, nowadays on funding from the current German government because they have a strong commitment to conservation or to fighting climate change. But actually, you don't know what may be happening to the next 4 years government. So
it's really interesting, isn't it? And I guess one thing just to kind of touch on too is in terms of individuals, we talked about sort of donations, appeals, maybe crowdfunding, sort of, I guess, fairly sort of smallish amounts, but lots of them. There's the other end of the individual market, isn't there? Which, I guess, you might call that a high net worth individuals, very wealthy individuals who personally give donations to, conservation or environmental charities too. And those relationships can be really important for charities to maintain.
Exactly. I mean, besides the fundraising moment when you really propose your project and you build your consortium, is also the fact of taking care of the relationship that you develop with an individual, but also with a government donor is really important, because it may create further opportunity for you in the future. It may mean that the organization may also have like extensions of projects that have been already funded. So what I always say also to the people that I'm working with, that I'm supporting in proposal development, do not think that once the grant has been secured and once the project is implemented, that your work with the donor is finished. No, it's really just the beginning of building a relationship, and a sustainable one, that can really take you to further funding, or also outreach possibilities for your organization, networking ones with other organizations, with other donors. So it's really important to invest also in donors' relationship behind the fundraising moment.
Yeah, and one thing I saw myself as a fundraiser when I did it for a few years is that once you secure grants, you're often thinking about the next grant, 2-3 years down the road when it finishes. But also, in a way, it's kind of money in the bank as well that allows you to raise more money. Sort of, I guess you might call it leverage more money from, because you can then say, well, we have this project, this much is funded. There's this bit of the project we've not funded yet. We have this thing called co-finance in the bank.
Exactly.
Therefore, if we have 300,000 in the bank, we want £1 million project. We pitch £1 million project to someone, we're only actually looking for 700. We're looking for this additional thing. So this new donor already has some securities. There are funds in place. So it's a bit of playing a game, really, but this co-finance helps you to build and build and build if you're strategic with what you've actually already secured.
Exactly. And also, I mean, co-financing is fundamental to any grant. I don't think it's some years ago, there were some grants that would just finance 100% of the cost of your project, while nowadays more and more you propose, you put out your technical proposal and your budget, and actually what the grant from a donor can cover is not 100% of your cost, but may well be 70%, sometimes up to 50%. So you have to be sure that you contribute to your own project in a way or another. And it's also sometimes for evaluating grants, what donors do is that the more that you have a share of co-financing by yourself, the more points you will get in your final evaluation. So the higher co-finance rate you can put out there, the higher success rate you may have in the final evaluation.
Again comes back to the idea of building a consortium and working with others too, doesn't it? If you haven't got any money, one way of securing that co-finance is to work with someone who already has a project underway, and then together it's very much like growing a plant. You have a seed, you can grow a bigger plant from that by working together. I'm really interested in proposal development. This is so important within fundraising specifically. It's what a lot of fundraising is around. Not everything, campaigns, appeals and stuff, that's different. But when you found a donor, whether it's public or private, usually what happens is you have to put something down in writing according to their terms, their conditions, their forms, whatever, and submit that to them in a very, can be in a very timely manner. Talk us through proposal development. What is it? How does it work? What are the mistakes to avoid? What does a really good proposal look like? Can you just paint us a bit of a picture of that process, please?
Yes. So a proposal, as you said, always starts from, let's say, a call for proposal. Most of the time, if you're applying for, as I said, from a donor that is like seeking money from a donor, that is structure, that is not giving money like away just on the basis of what the organization wants to propose. So they will have probably multiple calls or one call per year that is published on the website, and that is often always posted on several also search engines and newsletters. So you have a call for proposal that is really the Bible that every fundraiser has to adhere to. It's impressive how often like fundraisers, or in my case, like researchers that want to look for funds, they maybe focus on a couple, let's say the main objective of the call for proposal, but then they do not take the time to really read through all of it, from the background, why the donor organization is publishing this call for proposal that is targeting these countries in this historical moment. So everything you need to know, or let's say probably 80% of what you need to know to structure like rock star proposal is in the call for proposal. And always
so step one, understand the call for proposal.
Take really 2 good hours to just read the call for proposal, highlight things, make your own notes, but this is the Bible. That's the first thing, really. And then you will have a form that you have to fill out where, you will have to write the technical part of your proposal. So in the case of an environmental grant or conservation project, like what you intend to do, your activities, the methodology, the staffing, for instance, which expertise you will bring from your organization for implementing this type of project.
Yep.
And there will always be a section that is based on how your activities want to reach a certain result or final outcome.
Yep.
So that allows you to build from, let's say, the theory of change, as they call it, but put it also in like simple terms, like the project narrative.
Yep.
I'm the donor, I'm giving you this amount of money, you're requesting me this other amount of money. How from the money that I'm giving to you, you want to reach the final result or like the main objective of my call for proposal.
Yeah.
And this is also like, and you have to build the narrative, and really the idea that what I always try to think is as if I would take, the donor by hand, literally, and walk him or her through like the whole process, how I picture that my activities, the expertise that I'm putting out there is going to lead to any environmental improvement, to any social benefits or environmental co-benefits for communities, for instance.
Yeah.
This is like building these narratives also very important. And of course, you always have the budget part that, once again, I cannot like stress how important it is to build a budget that is really reflecting your technical proposal, the technical component of your project.
Yep.
Most of the time, I think in any sector I've been worked in, from development cooperation with NGO to research for development, as I'm actually working, people, of course, they start writing and thinking the technical part of the proposal, like what we want to do, what activities we have in mind. And they arrive in the last days, in the last rush hours before submitting the proposal, structuring the budget. In reality, I always invite like fundraisers or people that are developing proposal to try as much as possible as like build the technical part of the proposal together with the budget. Because after all, like a project is an investment for the donor, and they're interested in what you can do, but they're also interested in their return on investment.
Yeah. What must be there's a balance to strike in terms of how much you can promise to achieve within a project. I guess what you want to do is sell a real dream, in a sense, to a donor about how their money is going to be invested and the transformation that's going to occur as a result of that. And that needs to be attractive and attractive enough to want them to invest in you. but at the same time, it needs to be realistic, doesn't it? And something that you can actually realistically achieve within the time and within the budget. Could you maybe sort of
Exactly.
talk to that a little bit? Because obviously there's a tension there. You want it to be great, but not too great.
I think really, I mean, this is when I was working from a donor perspective, when I was evaluating my self-proposal that I would receive, when I was looking for the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, it was really clear to me sometimes how I would start reading the proposal backward, for instance, looking at the budget and then at the technical part. And I was really realizing, for instance, in a conservation project in a maritime area, and I was looking at, okay, how come they are like in the technical part focusing so much on building new structure for the protection of turtles in the seaside area? And I'm not like a technical expert. I have to say, like, I have an economics background, so I know more about numbers rather than environmental, like conservation. But what would strike me is that why are they spending, like, putting so little money on like structures, like laboratories, like core assets, and so much money on human resources, like so much money? Or why are they hiring an international consultant for doing this type of job, while I'm sure that in the country where they're implementing the project, there are tons of consultants, like local ones, whose cost may be like also lower, for instance, or who may not need travel budget. Like, why is the budget structured in this way? So I would always, whenever I was sort of giving like midterm review for a proposal and giving the chance of the applicants to like fine tune some things, I would always sort of nudge them with this question, like, why do you really need like so many hours for implementing this type of activity? Do you need an international consultant versus a local one? Do you need like, or why you say that you're doing capacity building, but I see like no trainers in your budget? Like, can you please talk me, like, justify this type of expenses? So expenses justification is really, I mean, I don't want to say that it all comes down to that, but that's really a fundamental part. And regarding like over promising and sometimes underachieving, I think like organizations should really build on and on what they already did, and like how their expertise can really bring something new in the field that they want to operate in. So you really have to demonstrate that you have the capacities for implementing, from a technical point of view, some type of activities that you're proposing. And you have to demonstrate that in the past, you've been, first of all, implementing a similar type of activities, even if you're now aiming to like sort of scale up your project, but that you have a strong basis that you can build on. And at the same time, for instance, if you're a medium organization and you want to do, let's say, the big jump, as I call it, you've been always fundraising with small, like based on individuals or local regional funds, and now you want to aim for a huge grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for instance. What you have to do is really demonstrate that you have also the capacity within your organization to handle the money that you're going to receive, that you have in place, for instance, an audit system, that your financial department is well equipped for handling this type of finances, that you have internal reporting mechanism that prevents fraud. So let's say that there's always a section, for sure, in concept notes or like full application forms, where you can like highlight your own capacity as an organization. And what I always suggest is, when you're writing this section, is really think about highlighting and showcasing your technical expertise, your geographical expertise, your human resources expertise, and your financial institutional expertise.
Mhm.
Do not fall into the trap of thinking that the technical part is the only component that is relevant to a donor. You have to take into account all of these blocks of the expertise and like also history of your organization that are equally important and that should be valued.
Yeah. Okay. What's it like to work as a fundraiser then? What are the sorts of skills that fundraisers require? And when do fundraisers become project developers as well? The people who actually develop the ideas. And when is it more about fundraising, working with the experts, the scientists, whoever, who want to run the project, know the project, and you're more the intermediary between the project and the donor? Could you maybe just think around that?
So I've been a bit on both sides of the let's say of the fundraising world. Sometimes I was fundraising by myself because I was a project manager and maybe I didn't have like a fundraising department in my organization that was backing me up. So I needed to like work on fundraising by myself. And currently, on the contrary, I'm supporting like with proposal enhancement and with the fundraising bit scientists that already have in mind what they want to do and the type of activity they want to carry out, but they need some sort of support bringing their research ideas to like an appealing project proposal.
I see.
And I think in both paths, you for sure need like strong, I think, storytelling like skills, really the ability to build a narrative and convince the donor that what you are proposing is going to work, is going to lead to concrete results, and that you have sort of the unique selling point that other organizations working in the same field, in the same country, for instance, in the same niche do not have. You really have to be able as a fundraiser to make your unique selling point shine.
It's fun. It's like sort of sales and marketing, really, isn't it? You're the salesperson.
It's a bit, but I mean, you have to sell something that is there, that exists. That's what I always warn people, like sell something that exists, that it's already there. You can do a bit of cosmetics, as I always say. A lot of time I send back proposals saying to the researchers, I did just a bit of cosmetics here or there, but your ideas, the activities are there. I did nothing more than just making sure that the language is more fluid and that what is really relevant for your proposal stands out. But I didn't touch the technical part, for instance. Most of the time, I do not have the expertise for commenting on, for instance, crop yield in Nicaragua, because I'm not an agronomist.
Yeah.
So,
but you can look at the story and you can refine and polish a story for the donor and position it. Yeah.
Exactly. Or another thing that I do, for instance, sometimes is really, I try to have in mind as much as possible of the history of the organization to bring that expertise into a proposal. Sometimes I work for an organization that is quite big, that is operating in a lot of countries and on different type of projects. And sometimes I have to tell to like research about, that you're writing a proposal on this topic and you have a colleague that is working on the same exact topic, just in another country. Why don't you? Exactly. So a lot of time you have to have this skill as a fundraiser of sort of like connecting dots.
Yeah.
That's really important. And it's something that you also learn with the job, I think. Or that at least I learned to do the more I was evolving in this type of job. And then in my experience, like a good fundraiser sometimes have to go through some sort of project management roles at some point, either at the beginning or at some point in their careers, because you have to be a good communicator. Okay, fine. But looking with a project management perspective, sometimes you see that there are some activities that may not be like well placed in the chronological order that the person who wants to implement the project has in mind. You have to have in mind, you have to keep in mind that that there are risks connected to implementing some activities. So you have to be honest in your proposal, and say, I will carry out this and this activity, provided that these assumptions are in place.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're working in developing countries, as I did for a lot of time, you always have to keep in mind that you are proposing something, a project, but you always have to propose at the same time risk mitigating measures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a fundraiser, I mean, you can read what project managers are supplying you with, the information that comes from the field or from the labs, if you are talking about scientists. But if you had the experience yourself of working as a project manager, you are able to spot which type of activities may need a sort of like backup or a risk mitigation strategy, and which do not need this type of mitigation at some point.
I see.
And then even if a lot of fundraisers do not like it, you really have to be able at some point to work with budgets and numbers. Even if in like more in bigger organization, probably you will always have your finance department or your financial officer that is helping you throughout the proposal development. But you also have to be realistic and think about, okay, I'm looking for this amount of money, but will I be able to spend this amount of money in this number of months or in this year? So you have to have a feeling for that, and you need some financial skill, but as I said, also like some project management experience that can help you in like sort of fine tuning what is realistic versus what you would like to do in an ideal universe.
Yeah, so a lot of skills coming together.
Yeah, and also partnership, diplomacy, because as I said before, you will always be working in consortium. So you have to be able to talk with your partners, to onboard them, even at proposal development stage. What happens a lot of time, and I think it's a very damaging practice, is that like the lead organization is the only one that is like working on the proposal, and you're just plugging in like some bits here and there from your partner. And I have to say the donors, they see like a proposal that has been written exclusively tailored based on the lead partner, and there is not taking into consideration the needs or constraint of the rest of the organization that are part of the consortium.
Yeah. That's a great picture you've painted, I think, for all the different skills and the different roles and the different hats that you wear as a fundraiser. We asked our audience for some questions for you, and I got some questions back, particularly from Anne and Esther, and they both asked something relating to courses, like how can people learn skills to become a fundraiser? If someone's interested in becoming a fundraiser, are there courses or things you would recommend for people like that to go and look into?
Oh, I'm a huge fan of like continuous learning and development. So, I mean, from a like formal education point of view, I think nowadays, and they weren't available when I did my bachelor and master, there are more and more masters are exclusively dedicated to fundraising. In the UK, in Italy, in the US, for sure. Like, so you could go for like graduate studies that are really focusing exclusively on fundraising. This is a possibility.
I didn't know that yet.
But in reality, like I think having a good like background in either economics or environmental sciences, if you go more for a conservation perspective, and then sort of complementing what is your formal education with online training on project management, proposal writing, academic writing, for instance. This is what I did, and is what really worked well for me. So I had, let's say, like my technical knowledge, and I look for ways through trainings or webinars or workshops or summer schools to complement every extra skill that I needed. So for sure, proposal writing, there are so many courses out there, online, in presence. So there are plenty of opportunities to like get these specific skills. I would always advise people also to get some training in communication, because that's That's always fundamental, either at interpersonal level or where you actually have to work and like draft a proposal.
Yeah, got you.
And I always suggest also like a project management course, like being it like Prince 2, PMI Institute. It's always good to have like in mind, even if you don't want to work as a grant manager, you're not going to implement the project yourself, you have to have in mind the constraints that the grant manager will have once they implement the project, that you either in the best case scenario you wrote together, or in the worst case scenario that you wrote for him or her. So you have to have these things in mind. And languages, if you plan to, I mean, I'm Italian and I worked most of my life just in English exclusively, and in French and in Spanish. Wow. So if at some point in your like fundraising journey or in your project management journey, you start to focus on a certain geographical area, I'd always suggest to invest a bit of time and money into like improving your language skills, because it pays off, especially when you're working with partners organization, or where you're working with communities in a specific country. Also, just being able, is not that you will ever ask to draft a full proposal in a language that is not English nowadays. Is very, very rare. Maybe in the Francophone area may happen, but most of the applications you will be working on are in English. But then the rest of the work, of the networking and partnership work that you will be doing around the proposal, like language skills are always like a good selling point and can really make a difference.
Yeah, particularly for international projects, international work, like you say.
Exactly.
I'd love to know a little bit more about you then, Elena. Tell us a little bit about, well, the work you're doing now, but also, your career path as well. Like, what steps have you taken to get to where you are?
Yeah, so I'm Italian, as I said, and I currently I'm working back in Italy after many years globetrotting around. It's the first time I come back with a 2 years contract in Italy. Just to say. And I have this work that is really fascinating, and the title is Proposal Enhancement Officer, which means that whenever there's a new call out, there are scientists, because I work for a research institute, there are scientists would like to go for, I work with them on the technical part of their proposal. So I help them shaping, for instance, the theory of change of the proposal. I try to look at them at the past experience of the organization and how can we, let's say, build a capacity statement in the proposal section that can really make the donor understand why my organization is worth of receiving the money and what is the added value that we can bring. So I do a lot of writing, editing, research. If not me personally, my colleagues also work a lot with donors whenever there's, for instance, a chance to revise or a two-step proposal and you get feedback from your concept note, for instance, then we may also work with the donor directly on how to improve the final proposal. And so this is more or less 50% of what I do. And the remaining 50%, I work as a project management officer. So I support the researchers in my department to keep track of all the things that they don't want to take care of. So technical reporting, financial matters, staff coverage, how can we ship products from this country to this other country? And actually, I really like the complementarity of the two jobs that I'm currently doing, because one is really improving that I do on the work that I do on the other side.
Right. So it sort of goes round and the thing gets better and better.
Exactly. So that's what I do nowadays.
Yeah.
And in the past, I have worked for the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation in the Balkans as a project officer. So I was following up on a series of projects that we funded, for instance, for NGOs or local governments.
Yeah.
So I was following up with the implementers on how the projects are going, payments, how to scale up a project that yielded very good results, and how to negotiate between like Italy and local partners for the future funding. And I did that for a couple of years between Albania and Kosovo. And before that, I was working for an NGO in the Balkans as well. And I also worked for a local municipalities in Italy, always, let's say, as a mixture between like program manager, fundraiser. I mean, the smaller the organization you work for, the more you will be doing a lot of double hatting.
Yeah.
So let's say that now I have a more defined role, but to arrive to a more defined role, I went through a lot of like different roles that were always connected in a way or another to fundraising.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing 100% fundraising. And this is something that whoever wants to approach this type of job has to keep in mind, that it's more and more rare to be just exclusively a fundraiser in organization nowadays. You may be like a fundraiser, but you may also have to work with donor relations. You may be a fundraiser, but also a partnership officers. Yeah. So flexibility is really important in this type of job, and curiosity, because the more you're curious about the different things that you can do in your current role, the more other possibilities open up.
Yeah.
And my background, I studied development studies between Italy and France for my bachelor. And then I got more and more interested about all the interconnections between like food production, development, political economy. So that I decided to do a master in agricultural economics. And I studied in Germany. And let's say that all the jobs that I did, but also the studying possibilities came through like fellowship, scholarship. So I always invite people to like really try, like there are so many opportunities also to finance your studies, studying abroad, doing exchange semester. There are so many possibilities out there nowadays, and they keep growing, honestly. So I think it's really important for current students, for instance, to sort of like try to research. And for instance, environmental grants is also a place where you can do this type of research, see where there are possibilities for broadening your study path, where there are possibilities to complement your studies with an exchange semester, because this really is what I created my profile nowadays. And every experience that I got in a different country, different university, or a different internship added like a small piece to the puzzle of what I do nowadays. And if I would have stayed probably in one place, like one like defined pathway throughout my studies and work, probably nowadays I wouldn't have like all the skills that I can bring to the organization I work for. So
yeah. As we start to sort of wrap up, I'm just sort of looking at our time as well. Could you just tell us a little bit about how environmental grants can help people? Like what the sorts of things it helps people to do? Who do you support? And how can people find out more and get involved?
Yeah. So as I said at the beginning, we are, let's say, a donor search engine. Like what you can find on our blog is really like a very tailored and technical, accurate like information about what type of donors are financing environmental projects, how much funding they have available, in which geographies, for instance, they operate. So anyone who's interested to look for funds to implement their environmental conservation project can go into the website, use our search engine, and for instance, search like donors according to a geographical location, according to the type of like funding they provide. So like, for instance, grants or fellowship or So like both individuals looking to implement a project or looking to fund their studies, for instance, in the environmental sector, or to implement a conservation project starting from the organization, they can find information that is, I think, very valuable. And the idea behind the blog is, of course, to bring like more and more information about environmental funds that are available out there to the wider public, and make it more accessible as possible to fundraisers and conservationists. But also we do it to increase, for instance, our own skills, like to really study donors that we never thought of, but that are out there, get in contact with them and figure out what they can do for organization operating in this sector. And another really great value added of the blog and the people that like volunteer on the blog is that we exchange our own experiences, and we do a lot of like networking, exchange of ideas between each other. So for me, has been amazing to meet like people that work in the environmental sector, but maybe from a different perspective than what I did. So it's a good place to go and like get core information about the funding in the environmental sector, but it's also like a good place if you want to volunteer and join us writing these like articles, these donor helping us expanding our donor repository. It's a good opportunity for you to improve your skills, but also to get to know other people that are interested and passionate in the same thing that you're interested in, and then can also guide you through, for instance, your own professional experience, the current one, or through your future studies if you're a student. So it's really a place, like the idea behind it was also to build the sort of like community and a networking opportunity for all the people interested in environmental conservation.
Fantastic. It sounds like a fantastic resource. It's really great that it's available, that you and a group of volunteers are building this and making this accessible to people. I think it's wonderful. Elena Zurli, it's been so nice talking to you on the podcast today. Thank you for finding the time to jump on. It's been great to get to know you a little bit. Good luck with your trip tomorrow to Colombia. It sounds like it's going to be lots of fun. If people want to find out a little bit more about you and your work and environmental grants, where should we send them?
To our website, www.environmentalgrants.com, and there's a form there. You can contact us. You can reach us through, we also have a LinkedIn group, always called Environmental Grants. A lot of fantasy and creativity. And you can also simply join the LinkedIn group, or write to me or to Erika Roggio, who is the founder of let's say the mastermind behind the environmental grants, and we can have an informal chat. And if you're interested in the project, you can give it a try and write your first article together with us, because we all cooperate also in writing our own articles. We edit each other's work, so it's really like you're doing something. People can do something for, let's say, a greater good, like a good cause. So showcasing the environmental funds that are available out there for organizations worldwide, but it's also a way really to improve your own knowledge about the funding landscape. So just write to us on LinkedIn, write us through the email or the contact form on our blog, and we will be more than happy to get back to you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks again. Really great to chat, Elena.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also please give us a rating or a review, because it really helps us to get in front of more people. Now, if you want our help to get clear and get started and get hired as a professional conservationist, I recommend you enroll in our free online training program, exploring how to get a conservation job. So if you're a student, a job seeker, or a career switcher, you'll learn the golden rule about how to get started, the key mistakes to avoid, and also we'll answer your your biggest questions. You can check that out at conservation-careers.com/free. See you soon.